Well, I'm Kathrine McCarron. I live in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Two big lessons from life experience. It doesn't matter what you say, it's how you act, what you do. People can blah, 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 but where are they coming from? How are they treating other people? How are they living their lives? What are they actually doing? And the other thing I've learned is we don't need nearly as much as we think we need. We can live with much, much, much less. And I look around, I've been here for 10 years, and I've got an apartment full of stuff. I came here with a van. What fit in the van is what I had. I had nothing. So maybe that's the other thing. I'm feeling much more settled and boring. Lived in Toronto most of my life. Moved up during the Vietnam War. I grew up in Ohio. Decided I didn't want to raise a family in a country where people had guns under their pillows and, brother fighting brother and father and son and the divisiveness. There's nothing new about what's going on in the States now. We're talking back in Vietnam and the racial tensions, the riots in the streets, it was scary stuff. I said, I don't want to raise a family here. Let me go to Canada where people are calm. Sold together. I had a shop. I had a store on Bloor Street for 10 years, and that was fun. Most everything I've done, I've enjoyed doing. It was fun. I was there for 10 years. I'd watch children growing up and marriages fall apart and parents die, and all the everyday stories. Got to know all my customers. And then I moved up. The kids finally were grown. They were off to university. They were off on their own. I said, I got to get out of Toronto. I've been treading water, just keeping everything stable, trying to make a home. So I moved up near Algonquin Park to a cabin in the woods. Spent 4 years up there. So moving up to this cabin in the woods was, it was pulling back, pulling in, and I was, those were my menopause years, becoming a crone, living, I say it took 10 years to move from a 10-room house in Toronto to a 1-room cabin up north. It was a simple life. Everything that was important to me fit in one room. I could reach out and touch the things that meant something to me, things I needed. We don't need much. I didn't have a refrigerator. I didn't have appliances. I had a little wood stove, didn't have a well, had an outhouse. Lived there for 4 years in tune, in rhythm with nature and the seasons and the smells and the sounds and lots of interesting people living up there. Artists who couldn't afford to live in the city, who moved up where living was much simpler and they could do their art and their crafts and rugged people. I met a group of women like me whose children were grown and they'd ended up in this very simple, very rural, near Bancroft, where there are more minerals under the earth than anywhere else on the continent. So there was this spirituality that just permeated. There was, getting rid of all the excess. There were no neon lights. There were no fluorescent lights. It was people living off the grid, people helping each other. You weren't in anybody's face, but your neighbors knew who you were and when you were coming and going. And, there was that, we had an option. We could either do a project for our thesis, or we could do your regular written, do your thesis research and produce a 300-page paper. So I thought, okay, my project will be to do a peace walk. So I put a pack on my back and went back to Ohio where my feet first hit the ground, where I grew up, find my own roots, put a pack on my back and walked for 3 months. This little sign on the back said Seeds of Peace. And I thought, this is my public statement about the war. We were at war by then. The U.S. had sent all the, and it was heartbreaking to see that happening. Like, when is it ever going to end? So I went out and walked as a pilgrim, and my message was, peace doesn't start when the politicians say put down your guns. Peace starts in our own hearts, in our own families, in our community, in our workplace, sit with each other, the people you love, the people you're close to, for 15 minutes. I never said the word meditation. I was in Ohio. I was in Bible country. But sit and just be quiet with the people you care most about for 15 minutes. That's all. Just be quiet with them for 15 minutes. Every day, once a week, it doesn't matter. Just be with the people you care most about. And don't talk. Just be there. Hold their hand. Be quiet. Find that place in your family, in your community, where you can make peace. So it was a journey for me too. Day by day, at human pace, one foot in front of the other. There were, after a couple of weeks, your senses heighten, all your senses, because you're at human pace, right there in the world. I could smell, I could sense water before I heard the creek or the river or what. The smells, the sounds become heightened, more part of the world that we live in. There were times when I thought I was crazy. There, a couple weeks, a month or so into it, I thought, what are you doing? Where are you going? There was no goal. There was no agenda. There was no route. There was no... So I would rely on other people for where am I going to sleep tonight? What am I going to eat? Where am I, I decided as a child, growing up, we learned about Indian mounds. There were Indian mounds all over Ohio. We didn't learn that much about the Indians or the sad stories about what happened to the Indians, but we knew there were Indian mounds. So I got a map that showed me where various mounds were, and I thought, let that be my route. So I sort of followed on back roads from one mound site to another, and along the way learned about the Indians who had built them, and sort of the story behind them. I met many, many interesting people along the way, and people would say, especially young women, I remember a young woman saying, I could never do that. And I said, why not? Why not? You can do whatever you want. In a way, it was, I was homeless. I didn't have a job. I had no responsibilities. I wasn't paying rent anywhere. It was like a bonus time out of my life. Now that I'm retired and spending more of my time with people who are retired, there's something it's almost like an equalizer. We really don't know when we meet each other or exercise together or do this or that what this person is bringing from their previous life. Were you a teacher? Were you a RCMP officer? Were you... Those things don't enter into the friendships I'm making now, necessarily. It doesn't matter what you did before. We're here right now. And I guess I'm wondering what is my place here right now? Miss Hickory, that's part of it. But when I look at where I've been and what I've done and the kind of risks I've taken or the kind of impact I've had, I think, well, so what?